Good evening. Welcome to Stoughton High School. I'm Julie Miller. I'm the principal at Stoughton High School here. For any of you that are not Stoughton High School parents, really glad that you were able to come out tonight. This is really an important topic. It is definitely something, vaping is definitely on the rise across the country, across Massachusetts, and of course across Stoughton. And it's something that's very real for us, and we need to be really thinking about it. So I'm really glad to have you here tonight, and we have a wonderful presentation planned for you. And to get us started off, I would like to introduce Miss Johnson, Cherie, who is coming to share her story today. And if you would give her your attention. Welcome her to the stage.
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Miller, faculty, and parents. My name is Cherie, and I'm here tonight speaking to you all, not because I'm a motivational speaker or a person used to speaking in front of a crowd or audience, but I'm here tonight because my husband and I are the parents of 5 children, 3 in which has attended and graduated from Stoughton High School. 1 is currently in elementary school. And lastly, our son, a current student athlete that attends Stoughton High School, that my husband and I have a daily routine of picking him up after practice. While dinner is being prepared, he showers and does his homework. We sit down as a family and eat together and talk about our day. But even through this daily routine, our son was terribly affected by the vaping epidemic. And as a parent, I feel I have an obligation to make other parents aware of our story, to trying to prevent other families from experiencing the most terrible experience that my husband and I have ever experienced as parents. It all began on October 17th, when I received an email from one of my son's teachers asking if she can call me at a specific time, as she wanted to talk to me about my son. I said, absolutely, I'll be awaiting your call. At the specified time, my phone rang. It was the Stoughton High School number. I thought it was the teacher that sent the email, but it was actually another teacher concerned about my son's odd behavior. As I was speaking to her, my phone beeped, and I asked her to hold a moment because I believe it's the teacher that said she was going to call me. However, it was not. It was a third teacher calling me about his strange behavior, stating he seemed to have been confused and just off. Finally, I received a call from the teacher that sent the email telling me about his strange behavior, stating he was using profane language, which was unusual for him. He was always respectful in the class. I told all 3 teachers that his dad and I would speak to him about his behavior because it was totally unacceptable, and to please call me should they have any further issues. That evening, we talked to our son about his teacher's concerns, in which he acted as if he didn't know what was going on, because according to him, he didn't have any issues on this day. At that point, my husband and I knew we had to be more vigilant, as we have always been strong believers that there isn't a teacher that teaches that's going to take time out of their day to contact us to make up a lie about our children. The following day, I received a call from Ms. Carr in the guidance department. Ms. Carr knew me as she was the guidance counselor for my 3 oldest children. And she told me he was in her office with her and he was behaving like a 5-year-old. And she advised me to contact his pediatrician and to get him drug tested because his behavior was abnormal. So immediately after hanging up the phone with Ms. Carr, of course I had all kinds of thoughts and feelings. I just felt I felt terrible. But I called his pediatrician, just as she recommended, and I said exactly what Ms. Carr told me. I said, my son is at school acting abnormal. His behavior's off, and his guidance counselor recommended that I call to get him drug tested. She told me that she would leave a message for the pediatrician to call me. The pediatrician called me that evening, but unfortunately I missed her call, and it was evening time. It was 7:30. And in her message, she said she'll be away until the following Wednesday, October 23rd. So I can call the office back and make an appointment to see her the day she returns, or I can just call her on the 23rd, and she'll be happy to speak with me. She said she'll let the staff know that she's waiting for a call from me. Again, that evening, his father and I spoke with him and asked him about his behavior with Ms. Carr and his teachers, and again, he said nothing. So we told him if there's any more incidents, we're gonna pull him from playing sports. He promised we wouldn't receive any more complaints. He promised. He said, you won't receive any more complaints. My husband and I attended the parent-teachers conference on Wednesday, the 23rd, and we spoke to all of his teachers that were there in attendance, and they all spoke highly of him, but suspected something was off with him as well. And just as our son promised, none of the teachers didn't have anything bad to say about him that week. He kept his promise. He did that. He acted as he was supposed to. So once again that evening after the parent-teachers conference, we talked to him about 2 hours, and finally he admitted to vaping. And he promised that day was the last day he would ever vape again, and we didn't have to worry about it. During our conversation, I reminded him of when my dad was in the hospital suffering from cancer in Boston. And we got off at the Mass Ave exit. And I'll never forget him asking me, he said, how are all these people out here like this along the highway? And I reminded him of my answer from 2 years ago. I said they were all probably good, educated people from good families, but got caught up with the wrong people. And now they're homeless and on drugs. I told him they could have started out small, doing something minor, just like him vaping. And it escalated. I told him just that. And I told him he doesn't want a life like that. And I reminded him that he has so much potential, that the sky's the limit. And he doesn't want to put a limit on his life by doing these things. With tears, he said, we don't have to worry about that again because he's done with vaping. He kept his word. But then 4 days after he stopped, on that Sunday, October 27th, our nightmare began. He came to his dad and I and said he was unable to sleep for 3 nights. My oldest son and his wife was having a baby, so we were at the hospital from Friday night to Saturday evening, and we got home, and everything seemed normal, and everyone was happy about the baby, but Sunday morning, I'm sorry. Yeah, he said he couldn't sleep for 3 nights straight, and he came to us Sunday morning saying he felt anxious, he couldn't keep still, he was terrified, and didn't feel like himself. And he said he needed something to help him feel better. And he asked if we could bring him to see his doctor in the morning. And lastly, the last thing he said, can I just stay in your room with you all? This is where I just feel so much safer. I feel safe being in your room with you. Of course, we said yes. His dad and I were just helpless. We were helpless just seeing him like that. It wasn't much that we could do, but we felt maybe he was just going through withdrawals of not vaping. And we're a praying family and we believe in God. And all we could do is pray and tell him to call on Jesus, and that's exactly what he did. And finally, he was able to sleep at the bottom of our bed for about 5 hours. But when he woke up, he was more confused. It was like we were having a conversation with two people. It was like it was my son, but then it was this other person, another personality. We just kept reassuring him he'll be all right. We'll get him to his doctor. And he stayed up under us all day and night. I felt like it was the longest day of my life. Monday morning came and I called his doctor's office at 8 a.m. on the dot. I spoke with the nurse and explained everything that was going on with him and all of his symptoms. And she recalled our conversation when I called the week prior. I didn't even realize because my mind wasn't stabilized. I didn't realize I was even talking to the same nurse. I was just a wreck. And she said that his doctor was off that day. She had the day off that day. But she'll put him in with another doctor. And she wasn't sure if this doctor was familiar with vaping. And I advised, I said, we'll take a chance. I'll take that chance and we'll head down that way because he couldn't stay in that condition. She agreed, and she said she'll call me once the doctor arrives if she wasn't familiar with it. My phone rung about a half hour later, and she said, unfortunately, this pediatrician, she's not familiar with the symptoms and issues with vaping. She said, however, there's an adolescence doctor that'll be in around noontime. She said, how long will it take you to get here? I said, we'll be in the area. I said, we're just gonna drive down, we'll be in the area. And she agreed for us to come down. But my son became more and more anxious and confused. So my husband told me to just call around to different places. I searched online for hospitals that assist teens with vaping. Mass General has a clinic that does specialize with vaping and with teens, but they didn't have availability until November. I continued to search until I found a detox for teenagers. I explained he was vaping, and the last time he did it was on Wednesday, and I explained all of his symptoms. She said the symptoms he's experiencing isn't just from vaping THC or this synthetic marijuana. She told me to ask him what else he was vaping. I asked him, and he said pesticides. She asked me to ask him when was the last time he vaped the pesticides. He said Tuesday, October 22nd. Well, he didn't say October 22nd, but he said Tuesday. I added October 22nd. And she told me to ask where did he get it from because the vaping ban was going on at that time. He just said he did it at school and he wouldn't give any further information. She then said, get your son to the emergency room right away. That's what people are dying from across the country. We rushed him to Tufts Medical Center in Boston because that's where his pediatrician is located, and she knew us as a family. I didn't know what was gonna come about it. That's why I didn't just take him to anywhere. I wanted to go where I felt comfortable, where they knew us as a family and knew about us. While we were in the emergency room, the doctors were online Googling, just as I was. They were Googling on the computer because they weren't familiar with the side effects of vaping, nor the side effects of vaping pesticides. They actually said they never heard of vaping pesticides. And it's something that teens are doing across the country. During his evaluation, he said he was hearing voices. He said the voices were telling him to do bad things, but he couldn't say what because it was just too bad to say. After they evaluated him by himself, they came out and talked to me and my husband, and they said they need to admit him into the hospital to evaluate him further, as they didn't feel it was safe to bring him home. We were told it's just not enough data to know if his state of mind would ever go back normal. They didn't know what the chemicals did to his mind. And they said it could be a temporary psychosis. They just didn't know. On the second day, they recommended him to be admitted into a facility that has staff that specialize in behavioral health. They gave us a few options, in which I did my research online, and I called the facilities asking questions. We didn't agree with neither of the first three facilities. We felt they weren't a fit for our son. We were told by the social worker that after you denied 2 facilities, they could say that we were denying care for him. My husband and I were adamant that we weren't sending him anywhere we weren't comfortable with. Then finally, the 4th facility offered. I found really good reviews online. I called the facility, and I spoke with a nurse that just really made me feel comfortable. Our son was at Tufts for 3 days, in which his dad and I never left his side. Throughout the whole process, we were sure to explain everything to our son so there were no surprises. We explained to him that the facility that he was going to was going to be locked in. We explained it all, because again, he was in his right mind, but then this other, I don't know, personality would come in. But whenever he was in his right mind, I would try and, I didn't want to leave him hanging. I wanted him to know everything. And we promised our son we would be there. Every day he was at that facility. The following morning, on Thursday, November 1st, I called Ms. Carr to make her aware of what was going on with him. And I advised that I would like to speak with someone at the school because I must help prevent other parents from going through this helpless feeling. I said if I had to go to the State House or to the Capitol in Washington, D.C., to get the word out that the manufacturers of these vaping products are marketing to our youth and ensuing danger to their lives, I will. Ms. Carr expressed her deep concern. She said she'll reach out to someone and call me back. I truly don't remember who. I know she told me who she was going to reach out to me, but my mind, I just couldn't think. My phone rang within a half hour of hanging out with Ms. Carr. It was the high school's number, and I would have never thought it would be the principal, Ms. Miller, calling me so quickly, responding to my agony. Ms. Miller listened to my story. She showed her sincere concern. I expressed my desire to speak to parents to prevent other families from going through this horrific experience as my family did. Ms. Miller agreed to it. She said she will reach out to the Stoughton Youth Commission via email with me on it to see if something could be put together for us to schedule a time to meet. By 1 p.m. that same day, we had a meeting scheduled for the following Tuesday. That Tuesday, we were scheduled to meet. I received a call from my son stating I was going to receive a call from the case manager from the facility that he was at, that they wanted to discharge him. And of course, the discharge time was the same time as our meeting. But I said I was just going to take a chance. I didn't know if Ms. Miller was going to be available, but I said I have to send the email. I took the chance. I sent the email to Ms. Miller to let her know I was unavailable to meet because I had to pick my son up. She congratulated me and gave me the option to meet with her and Stephanie from the Youth Commission the following day. The three of us met the following day, as well as 2 other times with other people of the Stoughton community. And that's how we are all here tonight. I couldn't be more thankful. But our son stayed at the facility for a total of 6 days. His dad and I kept our promise and drove an hour away to see him every day. And every day we went, we encouraged him and told him he was a day closer to getting home. He was diagnosed with substance-induced psychosis, and by the grace of God, he is in his right mind today, back to school and back to playing sports again. My son, who asked to remain anonymous and refused to give me any names of anyone vaping or any further information about others, but agreed to me talking to the parents, as he understands the seriousness and dangers all so well, and felt the need that I come out here tonight. As this vaping epidemic is not just affecting a specific ethnic group, gender, or age group, it's affecting all of our children. As he said, there are teens that you would never think would be doing it, are doing it. So please, please talk to your children and tell them our story, and take the necessary steps to seek help for your teen so you don't have a story to tell of your own. I thank you all for taking the time to come out to hear of our story. Be safe, be strong, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. That was very powerful. We have Stephanie Patton here this evening. She is from the Stoughton Youth Commission and OASIS, and she's going to kick us off on the next portion of this evening.
I am the prevention coordinator for the town of Stoughton. It's my pleasure to be here. I really want to thank Ms. Johnson again for sharing her powerful story with you all. What we're going to do now is we're going to share some factual information with you about what we know about what's happening here in Stoughton and our young people around vaping, and as well as just some general information about, you know, what are in these devices and sort of what's going on, and we want to allow for you to have time for questions. So I'm going to speak a little bit about what we know from our current data, and then I'm going to introduce Mary Cole, who's kind of our resident expert on all things tobacco and nicotine. She comes from the Greater Boston Tobacco-Free Community Partnership. Oh, I think I got that right. And actually, we were here this morning speaking with the high school students, and so, you know, we wanted to make sure you all had the right information. So really very quickly, those of you who are not familiar with the OASIS Coalition, we've been around since 2004. We are your local substance abuse prevention coalition. Our mission is to work collaboratively across the community to reduce youth substance use here in Stoughton among our young people, and we do that by really focusing on reinforcing healthy community norms, of which we have many here in Stoughton, decreasing youth access to tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs, and that includes electronic cigarettes, and creating sustainable policy changes that will help support healthy youth choices. And I'm happy at the end to answer some of the questions about some of the work we've been doing, but I want to jump into some of what we know. So I'm going to let Mary introduce herself in a second. We'll come back to this. So one thing I really want to say, I think it's really important when we think about stuff like adolescent substance use, is we really, there are a lot of things to be concerned about, and there are a lot of things to be hopeful for. And one of the things that I'm really hopeful for here in Stoughton is that most of our young people are not vaping, they are not drinking alcohol, they are not using marijuana. Most of our kids are really making great choices, and Some of our kids are feeling challenged by substance use. So what you see up here is a slide of what's happening with electronic cigarettes and cigarettes here in Stoughton, just as a comparison. And these are kids who report they've ever used. We survey our students every other year in odd years. We survey every 6th through 12th grader in the district, thanks to the Stoughton schools for allowing us to do this work. So the green bars are what is happening at the middle school. So you see that only 9% of students at OMS have ever reported vaping in their lifetime, but it's a big difference between that and cigarettes. Our cigarette use is almost zero. Electronic cigarettes here at the high school, 43% of our students have reported ever experimenting with vaping. The good news is that the majority of kids are not doing that, but that's a pretty high number, and it's one we're concerned about. And the blue bars are actually what's happening in the state. The state of Massachusetts, their data set lags behind us a little bit. Typically, we actually trend better than the state, so my guess is when their data catches up, we'll be trending better than them, but they're still concerning numbers. This is sort of what's been happening with our drug and alcohol use here in Stoughton at the high school over the last 10 plus years. The reason that I put the slide up here is I want to show you that substance use in Stoughton really has been decreasing, and that's great, and that I think is it's a credit to all the collaborative work that we've all been doing together. The thing that's concerning here is that the e-cigarette rate, which you see, so this is 30-day use, and we ask kids, let's take a snapshot, what happened in the last month, is trending up, and we've only been collecting that data since 2017. So we only have 2 data points there, but it's reflective of what's happening in the state and our country. So while other drug uses are trending down, we're seeing a concerning increase with electronic cigarettes. So this is what's happening current use. So we ask kids in the last 30 days, have you experimented with, and how frequently do you use alcohol, marijuana, electronic cigarettes? So here you see here at the high school the comparison between e-cigs, which is in blue, and cigarettes, cigarillos, chewing tobacco. As a state, as a country, we're doing really great work with this other stuff. Kids do not seem to put vaping in the same category, even though it comes with a lot of the same harms. So we have some work to do here. But again, most of our kids are making really great choices. This is a little bit confusing, but this slide is really important to me, and it's my last data slide. And what you see here is actually the orange bars represent our students that don't vape. So at the middle school, 95.5% of our students, nearly everybody, chooses not to vape. When we ask them what they think their peers are doing, more than half of our middle school kids think that most of their peers at the middle school are vaping. That is concerning. Here at the high school, we know that 75% of our students report that they don't vape, and yet 82% of them will tell us that they think that most of their peers are vaping. The reason that that's really important is that kids who hold that misperception are about 6 times more likely to vape themselves. If they think that their peers are vaping, and that's Stoughton data, so that's not, some research from across the country. It is true, generally speaking, but I know that about our own kids, that if they think that most of their peers are vaping, they're way more likely to do it themselves. So it's really, really important. And so that's a piece of data that we take really seriously, and we're going to be doing some work on that here in the community. So I think with those are my data slides. Let me introduce Mary. She's going to share with you lots of information. Are we going to hold questions to the end, or you want to take questions as you go?
If you guys have any clarifying questions for what I'm saying, then feel free to ask, but otherwise wait till the end, because a lot of the times I'll answer your questions as the slides go on. Okay, thanks, Steph. Yeah. So I run the Greater Boston Tobacco-Free Community Partnership Program. I'm funded by the state's tobacco program. It's called the Massachusetts Tobacco Cessation and Prevention Program. All very long titles. Basically, I'm a resource for towns in Greater Boston to do prevention and quit nicotine work. So I worked really closely with Steph around vaping prevention, and as you can imagine, vaping has totally taken over all of my work, even though there's a lot of other tobacco products. So first, I'm just going to do a bit of an overview so everyone's on the same page about vaping. So does anyone know what that is? I see kids raising their hand. Yeah, so I asked that because that is a Juul, the brand of e-cigarettes. So something I want you guys to take away from this is to be able to identify some of the products, and also to be able to identify the Juul, which is one of the most popular, which is the most popular brand of e-cigarettes, especially among young people. So the thing about vaping and e-cigarettes is they can all look really different, these products, and they can come in all different shapes, sizes, and colors, but they all basically work the same way. So they are operated by a battery, a lithium battery, that then heats up an atomizer that has these metal coils in it. Those metal coils then heat up the e-liquid, that e-juice that has chemicals and flavors and nicotine in it typically, and then that's inhaled through the mouthpiece. So overall vaping, the definition, so we're all on the same page when we're talking about this. It's using a battery-operated device to heat up something, some liquid, then you're inhaling it. So what I'm mainly going to talk about is nicotine, is heating up the nicotine concoction, basically. But we'll talk about this a little bit more. But as Sherry said too, like you can vape THC, you know, that's something. She said pesticides too. So like what you can put into devices is stuff that people can vape too. But the most popular thing is nicotine, so that's what I'll mainly talk about today. So the other thing to keep in mind is if you say, hey, to a high schooler or some young person, if you ask them if they use e-cigarettes, they'll say no, even if they use a Juul. Juul is an e-cigarette, but it's a brand, and for some reason, people don't associate Juul with e-cigarettes, but Juul is an e-cigarette. So instead of saying e-cigarettes, young people might call them vapes or you know, like a Tank or a Mod, or by their brand name. Like I said, Juul, there's the Suron, Blue Bow. So just there's different language, so you might have to like mention a few different names when you're talking about that. But again, for young people, Juul is an e-cigarette. So I talked about the e-liquid and e-juices that you're heating up to a high level and inhaling. So I hear some misperceptions about this, so I just wanted to kind of clarify what's actually in this stuff. So there's normally chemicals in there like nicotine, propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, food flavorings like diacetyl. And for a long time, I think people thought that it was kind of just like water and food flavoring. But that's just never been the case. That's never been true. You have to have these other chemicals in there to be able to like have that like liquid concoction and then heat it up. And the other misperception that I hear a lot of the time is that people think this stuff is actually regulated by the government, by the FDA, because it's a product that was being sold legally. And again, there's the state bill, the ban, that kind of like can be very confusing when talking about this stuff, but I'll speak about it generally. But the FDA, they have the authority to regulate ingredients of e-cigarettes, but they've delayed that. So right now you can buy like a Juul pod, and you could also buy something off the street, and they're both regulated the same. So just to clarify, there's no regulations of these ingredients. And here's my example. I showed this to the high schoolers today as well. So this is a vape juice. On the front, it says 0 nicotine. On the back, it says this product does not contain nicotine. And look at that last ingredient. It says nicotine. So this is just like my example to show that these products aren't regulated. And the other example I like to show is looking at the ingredients. Propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, and food flavors. So they don't even tell you what food flavor it is. So that just kind of shows how it's not regulated. Something else that I mentioned to the high schoolers today is with the food flavors, like sometimes if you look online, like, are food flavors safe to inhale? And then you get like vapedaddy.com, and they're like, yeah, the FDA says like, that food flavor is safe, but that's not true. The FDA might say a food flavor is safe to eat, like you can eat it, your stomach has acid that breaks that down, but if you heat a food flavor chemical up to a high level and inhale it into your lungs, That has never been approved, and that is not safe. And there's actually emerging research to show that the flavors itself do harm your lungs too. So just to go over some of the products a little bit closer, just to get an understanding of them. So in 2007, these like disposable e-cigarettes came to the United States. So when people think of e-cigarettes, a lot of the time people think of that one way on the left that looks like a regular cigarette. And so with these ones, they come pre-filled with the e-liquid, they're pre-charged, and when you're done using them, you just throw them out. And then these started to get more flavors with them. These ones also are called e-hookahs. And so that's a type of e-cigarette. Then we started to get these vape pens. These vape pens are rechargeable. You can fill it up with the e-liquid or e-juice itself. And that's kind of how these work. These vape pens specifically that look like this, that have the glass tank, they're typically used to vape the THC from marijuana, typically called like dabbing. And so that's just something to note with those vape pens. Next, we have these big devices like tanks or mods is what they're called. And these can heat up the e-liquid to a super high level. And they produce a really large amount of that cloud that you see. So if you guys like are ever driving or walking and like a huge cloud of smoke completely like encompasses you or your car, that's one of these like tank or mod systems because they're like really powerful. And these can also be more expensive. And finally, kind of what took off are these rechargeable e-cigarettes, also called mod pods, that have a pod device that has the e-liquid pre-filled in them and that you put in the device. And so that's what Juul is. And as you can see here, they actually have a lot of USB adaptable chargers that you can just like charge right in your laptop. And I think actually in that laptop, there's a Juul charging right there. So one of the reasons that e-cigarettes kind of took off recently is because of Juul itself. The design of Juul is really sleek, it's really modern, and it's really concealable. It's something techie that's very appealing to young people. So not only is that design appealing, but what else is appealing about Juul is actually like the nicotine content itself in there. So all these other e-liquids and e-juices before Juul, they were free-based nicotine and they didn't have that much nicotine in them. If you put more nicotine in them, it was too harsh and you just like couldn't inhale it. But Juul, they ended up putting benzoic acid in there and nicotine salts. And this made it a lot easier to go down, and you were able to put a lot more nicotine in there. So Juul has an insane amount of nicotine in there. There's so much nicotine that it's 20 cigarettes worth of nicotine or a full pack of cigarettes in that little pod. And just an example to show how much nicotine's in there, the European Union, they actually regulate their e-cigarettes over there, so they regulate the nicotine content. So they're allowed to have 20 milligrams worth of nicotine over there. But with Juul, in the United States, the Juul has 59 milligrams of nicotine, so it's 3 times the legal limit that's allowed in the EU. So it's just like a really insane amount of nicotine that's super addictive. So I'm gonna hope this video works, but it's a really short video. Thank you. I think it's just good for adults to kind of see the appeal of vaping a little bit, and I'll just talk about some of the reasons why. Okay. Oh.
Whoops. No, we're not hearing it.
Okay.
You know what?
Something that is
They're not
literally
gonna do that.
sweeping the nation. Everywhere I go, it is a
that working?
whole thing.
I don't think that's working.
I don't know. Can you guys hear that? Do you hear it?
You can hear it?
Yo, what is going on, guys? Today's video is gonna be a jewel sesh. We got the mango pod.
The cool cucumber fruit medley.
I've got this creme pod because I thought it would be festive.
It tastes great.
Well, if you want a head rush, definitely the Jewel.
It's really strong.
My God, bro, give me the biggest neck bush.
The Jewel Challenge. You gotta hit this thing as many times as you can.
We're doing the Jewel Hotbox Insane Nick Buzz Challenge, you dig?
I got some accessories.
Jewel wraps. Type in charging case for Jewel. Rolo bag. Sword drop. Ghost stick.
This one is watermelon. It is literally so good.
Okay, thank you. So I like to show that to parents because I think it shows reasons maybe why this stuff is appealing to young people. So first off, you could see the youth kind of blowing clouds and like doing designs with the clouds of the smoke. And that's something that's appealing. The other thing is you might, if you could hear anything, they talked about the buzz, the head rush that they got from the Juul. Or from their vape, and that's something that you get from such a high amount of nicotine that you get like a buzz from it, kind of similar to a cigarette. But with Juul and these e-cigarettes, it goes down a lot easier than a cigarette. It's not as harsh. And you could just kind of see how it's a social thing as well. So that's why I like to show that video. And so another misperception that I hear a lot of the time is people tend to think that they're inhaling water vapor, and that's not true. It's never been true. It's never been water vapor. What is produced by these vapes and e-cigarettes is actually an aerosol. And how I describe that today to the high schoolers, as I said, like an aerosol is like a hairspray. So if you like spray hairspray on your skin, like that's gonna be sticky and gross on your skin. So imagine inhaling that in your lungs. Like that's gonna stick on your lungs. So some of the stuff that we know is in the aerosol. There's cancer-causing chemicals in there. There's heavy metals. So the heavy metals come from the metal coils that are in these devices that are heating them up at high levels. And the flavorings, like I mentioned as well, aren't safe. And also nicotine, which I'll talk about a little bit more, but just so some concrete examples, there's propylene glycol, which is an antifreeze. There's acetone, a nail polish remover. Ethylbenzene, that's in paints and pesticides. Formaldehyde's in embalming. And then nicotine, that's the addictive feature in cigarettes and tobacco products. And rubidiums and fireworks. So just some concrete examples to kind of like know what you're inhaling into your body. And so we don't know long-term health consequences of a lot of this stuff that we're inhaling in our body. Now we're seeing these vape-related lung injuries, so we're seeing some serious short-term consequences, but we still don't know too much about the long-term because it hasn't been around long enough. But we do know a lot about nicotine, and specifically nicotine with adolescents and how it's really harmful for adolescents. So nicotine's highly addictive, and for addiction radar, nicotine's on the same addiction level as like heroin, as cocaine. So it's right below heroin, so it's really, really addictive. We also know that young people we know that adolescents and young people that start smoking or using nicotine have a harder time quitting than adults who start. So the data is 9 out of 10 adult smokers, they started smoking before their 18th birthday. So most adults who smoke, they started smoking as a teen. And that's because their brain's more susceptible to addiction. We also know that young people who vape are more likely to become traditional cigarette smokers as well. And just a little more detail on nicotine and the adolescent brain. We know that nicotine impacts that brain because your brain's developing until about age 25, and nicotine can structurally and chemically change the makeup of your brain. So what it can do is it can lower impulse control, it can lead to mood disorders like depression, it also can disrupt brain circuits that control learning, and it can prime the brain for addiction to other drugs. So it's a gateway drug in that aspect. Something that I talked about with the high schoolers today is about how the tobacco and vaping industries want young people to use their products because they are the most profitable customers that they have. Because if you can hook them when they're young, they'll be lifelong customers, and that's something that's really important for young people to understand, because they might not really care as much about the health effects. You know, like nothing happens to young people, like they're gonna be fine, nothing will impact them, they think. But if you get them angry about how this industry just wants to make money off of them, that's something that's more impactful. So like the bottom quote is from Philip Morris, and they said, "Today's teenager is tomorrow's potential regular customer, and the overwhelming majority of smokers first begin to smoke while still in their teens. The smoking patterns of teenagers are particularly important to Philip Morris." So that was back from tobacco industry documents in the 80s. And what's interesting is now we know the owners of Philip Morris, they now own Juul. One of the executives at Philip Morris is the new CEO of Juul. So we know that the tobacco industry, they own a lot of these vape companies, they invest in a lot of these vape companies, and they're using the same exact tactics to hook young people on their products to make the most money, and to get those replacement smokers. So just some of their products are making these products, some of their tactics are making some of these products cheap, sweet. So over 15,000 flavors, like you can see here, there's like cotton candy, unicorn milk. There's also cheap, like there's discounts on this stuff, and it's just a lot cheaper than normal cigarettes for the most part. And also easy to get. They want this stuff to be available everywhere, and that's a tactic by the industry to have it available on like every street corner, every convenience store. I just want to mention this quickly that with the new state bill, so you guys might be aware that it bans menthol cigarettes as well, and that starts on June 1st in 2020. And the reason that the state does that is because menthol's nationwide is the only flavored cigarette that's left on the market. All of the rest of flavored cigarettes were banned in 2009 because the FDA said like the tobacco industry was targeting children with flavored cigarettes from their documents. But menthol got exempt because the tobacco industry lobbied hard to keep it in. And the reason they lobbied so hard to keep it in was because menthol makes it easier to start and harder to quit because menthol's like an anesthetic. And we know that the tobacco industry targets young people with menthol cigarettes, and they also target communities of color with menthol cigarettes, specifically the African American community. So just kind of like a quick 101 on why menthol was banned for the state. And also we know that Stoughton, a few months ago, they restricted menthol cigarettes to adult-only stores, kind of knowing this before too, and knowing the impact of menthol. And again, this is just some advertising. This is Juul's advertising they started with. And this is blue, which is not working very well. And then the other thing to keep in mind is we know vaping is really popular right now among young people, but the tobacco industry is always coming out with something new. So there's something called IQOS that is called like this heat not burn product from Philip Morris, where you put like a tobacco stick in this like battery operated device, and it's just a new thing that is happening that's to be aware of. The other thing that we're seeing among young people is using these like pouch tobacco called like snus. This one on the bottom right called Zyn, they claim that there's no tobacco in it, but they just have nicotine in there. And we're hearing that that is something that young people are starting to use as well. So things to be mindful of. Okay, so I just have a few things that people ask me often that I'm just gonna go over. So one question I get a lot is, how do we know if young people are vaping? First, we know that these vape products can offer a kind of unexplained sweet scent. So, for example, like if the boys' bathroom smells good, that might be a sign that someone's vaping. So it's like an abnormally sweet scent, maybe like Bath and Body flavor. We know that with the THC, the marijuana, that if you're vaping it, it's not as strong as like a classic like joint that you'd have with marijuana, but you can still kind of smell like a faint scent of it. Something else to keep an eye out for is like unfamiliar kind of techie products that might not be pens or USB drives or highlighters, but just to keep an eye out at products and to look at them, and even chargers and stuff. I know schools will like pull something up and be like, is this a charger for like a Juul or something? And then I look at it, I'm like, yeah, it is. So that stuff, and also like the Juul pods, that's a Juul pod there. And so the empty cartridges are something that you can see often, and the caps to them. I've had parents say they found them in the laundry too, in like pockets. And then the final thing is signs of nicotine addiction. So signs of change in your young person. Are they becoming more anxious and irritable? Do they have to leave the room more frequently? Or maybe they're going to go vape. And so these are actually just a few signs from Smoke Free Teen about nicotine addiction, just to keep an eye out for. Some other ones are, headaches, trouble sleeping, feeling hungry, and those just intense cravings as well, and also having trouble concentrating. That's a big one too. So these are just some signs of nicotine addiction, just to be aware of if you see any change. Another question I get is like, what are other dangers? And you guys might have heard that like batteries have exploded and caused like third-degree burns. So that's something that's happened with some of these products. Something else that's a little more common that we hear that happens is nicotine poisoning. So in that video, if you saw some of the youth like vaping like 5 products at once, or like they keep doing it and keep doing it, and they're doing these challenges, like they're inhaling a lot of nicotine, and nicotine is poisonous, and so they're actually getting nicotine poisoning a lot of the time. And some kids even might call it getting nick sick, so nicotine nick, and getting sick from it. And what happens with that can be like vomiting, nausea, headaches, and in extreme cases, even seizures too. So something else to be mindful of. And then where do youth get these products? Most often, so from the state, and also in Stoughton, I know from their survey that most often someone like bummed one or borrowed one from a friend. So like they might not own it themselves, but someone else has one and they'll take like a hit off of it. I believe the second most popular one in Stoughton was friends and social sources, so that third one down. So you know someone that can get it for you, basically. And then the third one was directly from a retailer itself. And then we do know that youth can sometimes get them online as well. Okay, and then I'm going to transfer over to Steph after this too, but what else can you vape basically? We talked about THC, we heard pesticides as well, but with these open systems that you can put anything you want in them, like you can put anything, you can technically vape anything in them, so it's just something to be mindful of. With closed systems like Juul, sometimes you can actually open up the Juul and put what you want in there, even though it seems like you can't open it, but you can. And there's also like compatible devices too that might come pre-filled in a pod for Juul, and that you can put in the Juul system. Steph is more an expert on THC, so I'm going to let her finish this off.
Okay, I'm going to do 2 quick slides about THC. Do people know what THC is? THC is the active ingredient in what? Marijuana, right? So we do know that sometimes young people use these devices and they put THC in there. The reason that we care about that is actually exactly what Mary said earlier. The adolescent brain, all of our brains, are developing until we are 25 years old, which is a lot longer than we originally thought, and that's pretty new research. So it's really, really important, and this is what I tell even my own child, that we don't want to put stuff in our brain that's while it's developing. That is one of the most important things in your body, right? So what we want for our young people is for their brains to be as powerful as they possibly can so they can achieve all the things that they want in their lives. So we don't want to risk that by adding substances that can really sort of interfere with their healthy brain development. So we do know that for young people, their risk of addiction if they use THC is more than if an adult were to do that. So about 1 in 10 people actually adults can end up addicted to marijuana. Contrary to popular belief, sometimes people are surprised by that. But if you're under 18, the risk actually goes down to 1 in 6. So that's significant. It's because the adolescent brain is different than an adult brain. We know that marijuana today is a lot stronger than it used to be, and particularly the things that people are putting in these devices are concentrated forms of marijuana. So it is really important. And I think we still don't even really know what the long-term impacts of using highly concentrated amounts of THC are, because it's fairly new to our culture. We do know for kids particularly, and this is something too that as parents and as educators we care about, is THC can really affect your memory, your learning, concentration, attention. So it's kind of no surprise that with people who use a lot of marijuana as adolescents, their educational outcomes are not as good as people who don't. So if you're having trouble focusing in school and you're having trouble thinking and problem solving, it's going to be hard to do well and to continue to attain things with your education. And we also know there's a lot of new research about THC decreasing IQ, and we don't really know if that's permanent or not. So that's important. There's also some really significant findings around marijuana and long-term mental health issues, increased risk of things like schizophrenia, and other mood disorders. So things that are pretty serious and that we need to be paying attention to, and that research is actually still evolving. So it's something that is important to us. So I know
I forgot that I had this slide.
yes, and we're getting here on time. So if you want to see if people have questions about that
Do
at
you
the
guys,
end.
yeah, do you guys have any questions, or what's our next slides?
Let's keep going. Go one more. Let's do
If
these
you
last
guys have
two.
questions about the new state law and stuff, those are slides on it, so I can answer that, but we just want to be respectful of your time and everything.
Yep.
And so I think Steph's just going to talk about talking with your kids.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So we want to, before I turn this back over to Principal Miller, it's really important for you as adults to know that you are actually, if you're a parent, you are like the most important person in your kid's life when it comes to preventing alcohol and other drug use. It's really, really important. And if you are a teacher, a coach, a mentor, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, if you have young people in your life, it's really, really important to be having conversations with the young people that trust you about vaping, and also about all this isn't only about vaping, really, if you think about it. It's important to be talking to your kids and sharing your expectations and your concerns and your and the sort of what is expected in your house around all forms of alcohol and other drugs. It's important to really dispel those myths. The one about water vapor is the most pervasive one that we hear. It's not water vapor, and it's really important for young people to know that. The hairspray analogy is a good one that literally sticks with people. Mary talked about talking to young people about the idea that the tobacco industry is really targeting young people to make money off of them. If you hook a young person on nicotine, they can be your customer for life. That is the best marketing strategy that this industry has, and that can actually get people pretty fired up and angry, as they should be. So when we think about talking to your kids, it's really important to be patient, to try to not react if your kid tells you something that's concerning, and to really try to come from a place of helping. There is no sort of perfect time to have these conversations. We encourage parents to talk to your kids about these things often, regularly. Sometimes the car is a really good place to talk to your kid because they don't have to look at you, right? But they're trapped in the car. If it's an older kid and they can be in the front seat with you, they're sitting side by side with you. They can't get out, hopefully. And you can say these things. And believe me, it often feels like teenagers aren't listening to you. They are, and they tell us over and over again, we know from the research that, you know, when parents are clear with their teens about alcohol and other drugs, that is the most important thing that protects kids from all these things. And you heard Cherie talking about that in her household. There are a lot of things that were going on in that house that are protective factors that are really important. Eating dinner with your family and having regular conversations, or breakfast, or whatever, whenever you can make that happen. Those conversations are really important. Showing your kid you care, showing up at things like this, coming to their school, knowing who their friends are, all really, really important strategies. You know, making sure they're in bed at night. So you heard her talk about all those things, and also to know that it doesn't mean that you're immune, unfortunately, to some of these things. We saw how invasive the industry really is and is really targeting our kids. And so those are all strategies that will help protect your kid, and hopefully, you know, if you're in a tough situation with them and you have to have some of these conversations, they're more likely to have better outcomes because you're able to, you know, you sort of heard how they were able to work on this issue together as a family. So that's really important. It's important to know what these things look like. When we're done tonight, we have our little hidden in plain sight display. I encourage you to come up and like look at some of the products and talk to us. We have lots of great resources here in Stoughton. So Principal Miller will talk about all the great resources that are here in the schools for kids. You also have the Stoughton Youth Commission. There are four of us actually here tonight representing the Youth Commission. If people have questions, we're happy to talk to you, but we are a free resource here in town for youth and families. If you're struggling with this in your family, or you don't know how to talk to your kid or to initiate that conversation, please, please, please call us. We're happy to talk to you. You don't need to commit to long-term counseling to be able to have a conversation with somebody there. We also, and when you leave tonight, if you didn't take one already, we have all the Youth Quit resources on a handy-dandy little card. And so the things that you see up on the screen behind me tonight are available. These are resources that are specific for kids. They are, they use texting, they're confidential, you know, so, you know, put that if your kids are in the high school, they all got that card today, but it's a good thing to stick on your fridge if it's something that you are concerned about. So I think what I would like to do is hand it back over to Principal Miller. If people have questions, we're happy to take them, but I want to be careful about time here.
And before I say anything, I know Cherie has one more point she wants to make.
One additional thing I wanted to say is when we were at the hospital, I was blown away when I heard my son say he was vaping for a year. I couldn't believe it. So just be mindful, really, really be mindful. And when I think back, I remember him always clearing his throat, and like I had, you know, I was just blown away, and I was just thinking about how he would always say he felt something in his throat, or he couldn't concentrate, or just pay attention. You just got to pay attention. I thought we were doing everything we could to be watchful, but we wasn't. And just remember that these vaping carts and things, there's no smell. We went upstairs every night, no smell. And that's the place he didn't want to go. He didn't want to be in his room. He wanted to be in our room. And even today, he's not in his original room. He moved into his oldest brother's room that was vacant. So just be mindful. I just wanted to add that. I couldn't believe that he was doing it for a year. So, but that's all. I just hope this helped all the parents that's out here. I wish there were more, and I know Ms. Miller tried to do everything she could. They thought of all kind of ways to try and get parents out, and that's one of the issues as well. I talk to the teachers, and they say, you would be amazed at how many parents don't answer the phone when they call, or they don't call back. I'm like, I couldn't believe it, because as soon as I see a school number, that's the first thing I'm doing. I'm picking up if I miss the call, I'm calling back. Do you know who called? And we all have to be like that, because we never know. We never know in this day and age what's happening. And it's so many dangers. We see all kinds of things happening in other places across this country. So if you know other parents, just pass the word. Be mindful. Answer the phone when you see the schools calling, because You know, at the end of the day, we all love our kids, and we want them to have a bright future.
So here at Stoughton High School, we do have some resources for our kids, and we talked about that today in the presentation with our high school students. I know the middle school has some resources as well. So there are also consequences that are associated with students that are vaping in school. I just want to mention those consequences to parents as well, as they can be pretty heavy. It's treated as a drug offense here at the high school, so if students are found in possession of vaping products or vaping on school grounds, it is an out-of-school suspension, and they automatically get enrolled in a cessation program to try to help them quit. But we are really wanting to make sure that we get to those kids before that place and before they get to that point. So we have guidance counselors, school counselors, adjustment counselors, and administrators all able to speak to your child about the dangers of vaping or connect them with resources, whether it's through the Stoughton Youth Commission or get them involved in the cessation program themselves. Encouraging your child to go speak to any one of those individuals, their school counselor, adjustment counselor, or administrator, isn't going to get them in trouble. We would rather see them get better and be healed and move on to a healthy life than to afford those consequences. So if kids are struggling, they should be coming out and trying to seek that help, and we would encourage that. Something else to think about is that for our athletes, they also incur suspension from sports when they are caught vaping or using any drug or alcohol product. And so that is a mandatory MIAA suspension from games. So that's something that we don't even have control over. So that's just one other thing to be mindful of. But again, we are really here tonight because we want to educate you. I know I have conversations very often with parents about their children and feeling that there's a lot of misinformation about the same things that Stephanie and Mary spoke about, that people are under the misperception that it is just water vapor, or that they feel that it's safer to give their kids a vape than a cigarette. And when I talk to kids here at the high school about that, at one point people thought cigarettes were safe. When cigarettes first came out in the market many years ago, people were smoking, think there was no harmful effects. But now we're in that same place right now with vapes, where we don't know what those long-term effects are, and we're starting to see some really serious short-term effects. And so this is why I wanted to make sure that you're all coming out. It is definitely a trend that we're seeing here at the high school. We are also seeing it in our middle school, and that's the same across the state. So the more that we can get education out there to our parents and our community, the better off we are. So at this time, I say we'll open up to some questions, and we also have a raffle. Did everyone get a raffle ticket on the way in? Ms. Tapper, you want to bring that bowl up here while we wait for a question to come? So we have some great raffles tonight. I know that you all came out here to get this great information, but you also might have come out with some really great prizes. So we have some really cool things, and we have 3 different raffle color tickets because we have a couple of different prizes that really are only appropriate for the high school level. I have a big bowl here. Are there any questions that we can maybe start to answer here for you?
Yeah, so the Surgeon General says that secondhand vape is not safe either. So like that aerosol, if you exhale that, then if you smell that, you're also inhaling that. Again, we know long-term consequences of secondhand smoke, but we don't know long-term consequences of secondhand vape. But we do know that it's not safe. Yeah, hope that's helpful.
Great question. Any other questions? All right, so tonight we have our big raffle, which I'll put at the end. Keep y'all in your seats. But we have a beautiful,
Yes.
perfect. We have a beautiful Stoughton High School Black Knights sweatshirt. And this could go to anyone, Ms. Patton. So I don't know if you want to just draw any color.
Okay, so I won't look.
Yep.
All right, I'm not looking. All right. So this is a red ticket, and it's 439681. All right. Excellent. All right.
And we also have this great Minnesota Black Knights water bottle that has a couple of
I could go to anybody.
great bracelets inside here. You go to anyone.
Okay, here we go. Oh, it's another red ticket. Okay, 439-675. All right. They're going to do a yearbook, but I guess we're going to have to get that for Matt. He said, yeah, we'll get the name.
Congratulations. All right, and for our middle school folks.
Which are blue tickets, right?
Yep, which are the blue tickets.
Okay.
Mr. Palantonio has generously donated a yearbook. So we are going to cover the cost of a yearbook for this lucky winner.
Okay, 105-452. Anybody? 452, blue ticket? Uh-oh. All right, I'm gonna pull another one, you sure? All right, okay. All right, 105-459. Yay, okay. Yes. Do you have a pen or something? I'm sure we have a million pens. You know, we can put it in my phone. All right, we'll make sure, we're gonna get your name so that
Get
we
your
can
contact information.
get your info to Mr. Colantonio. Yes. Yes. All right, so don't leave without talking to one of us.
All right, and then the big prize.
Yep.
Ms. Patton, we have a user fee for either athletics or music. This is a big dollar prize here.
Okay, and it's going to a red ticket.
The value of like $200 if it's an athletic fee.
Okay.
I think it's $100 if it's music. So one or the other, you get to pick. All right, so we're looking
All
for
right,
red
we got a
tickets.
red ticket. Okay, so it's 439-668. Somebody's gonna be sad if they went home before this ticket got pulled. 668, anybody? Okay, all right, we're pulling another one. Oh, no, 668, checking. Yes? Yay! All right. So we have to take her name as well. All right.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Well, okay, are there any other questions?
We'll stick around. We have Hidden in Plain Sight up here. Please come and talk to us and come through the display. And thank you all for coming out tonight. We really appreciate all your time.
There was one question.
Oh, there was another question. Yes. With hookah. You want to take that, Mary? Oh, here. Microphone is on the ground. Yes.
Yeah, so she asked about hookah. So hookah and e-cigarettes are different. One thing that I mentioned is like e-hookah, which is an e-cigarette, but I think it's like supposed to be more of like a traveling hookah, like, I don't know, an excuse for a traveling hookah. So hookah, there's some misperceptions about hookah a lot of the times because it's like filtered, it's tobacco that's filtered through water in a way, so people kind of think it's like safer because of that, but you actually get a lot of chemicals through that, and an hour-long hookah session is 100 cigarettes of nicotine, so it's like a ton of tobacco and nicotine that you're inhaling with that as well. Yeah, so hookah definitely is something that we see, especially among young people, that they use, and it's something that is actually pretty addictive in a lot of ways, and it's not safe or good for your lungs either. And I know, I think the Truth Initiative, that bottom one, I think they have some good information on hookah as well, if you want more info on it. Yeah.
Any other last questions while we're here?
You see him up there?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I did.
Were you going to ask a question, Mike, or are you making a statement?
So they'll always constantly throw out there that the vaping, the alcohol scenario. Are you gonna be in vaping now? Are you gonna be in alcohol? Okay, so rather than addressing the crisis that we have with the youth, this is what they throw back at you. You know, it's a legal product, we're allowed to sell it. You know, we don't, we card the minors, we card people to make sure they're of age, and then they throw this vaping analogy and they throw the alcohol analogy. So how do you address them?
Yep.
When they this?
So, well, a couple things. So the state law is changing, so those convenience stores aren't going to have those products anymore. And in Stoughton, we did that earlier, actually. So I've been in a lot of those Board of Health meetings. I do believe in my heart that the convenience stores are absolutely doing the best that they can to card young people. I think that they don't want to sell to minors either. I also think that they are being targeted in their own way by the tobacco industry, right, as a way to make money. And I think that what we often say to convenience store owners, so one, nobody's perfect, and sometimes people make mistakes, and we know from our own data that kids are able to get these products at convenience stores, and I've said that at public hearings before. So I think, you know, people are doing the best they can, and kids were still able to get those products, which is why we were asking the Board of Health, and which they did, to pull those products from convenience stores. But the bigger issue actually really is that, and Mary talked about this before, is it's a strategy of the tobacco industry to have these products everywhere, and for them to look really appealing, and for them to smell really good, and for them to, you know, have all these crazy flavors like unicorn slime or whatever. I don't even know what that is. And so what happens is kids frequent those convenience stores because they're buying other stuff, right? They're buying chips and soda and candy, and they're conveniently located and walking distance to all the schools. And so when they're in those places and they're surrounded by these products, it really normalizes them, and it makes it seem like most people are doing it. And so even though most of our kids aren't using those products, when you're sort of faced with that all the time, and the advertising really is, you know, one could really say, the industry would disagree with this, but it really does look like those products are being targeted for kids. I mean, I don't know that, you know, unicorn slime and some of those other crazy flavors that Mary showed you are really things that adults are interested in. You know, like that's really our bigger concern, is it's like it's in the water, you know, it's everywhere, these products. And so, you know, we were trying to work to pull those out. You know, I think it's tough to be a small business owner, and so I think that is you know, that it's fair. It was a legal product. That's changing in our state, and so, you know, I think that it helps all of us in terms of our adolescence that the state made some of the decisions that it did with the new state law. So if people have questions about that, you know, Mary's happy to answer those. But does that help, Mike? I don't know if that helps.
I'll add one thing.
And Mary wants to add
I'll add
something.
one thing. And the other, like, I go to Board of Health hearing. Part of my job is to go to Board of Health hearings all the time and testify, like, in favor of stronger regulation. So it's very fun. Lots of tobacco lobbyists and retailers that I see. But one thing that I say too is, like, when with marijuana, how it's newly legalized, like we're not selling that at every corner store where kids can see it. Like, we're selling this in very specific locations to adult-only stores. And I think if we'd start over selling tobacco products, I think we'd have a similar, you know, manner in doing that. But it's just been so ingrained in our society and in retailers of selling tobacco products, like, everywhere, and in these retailers. So that's just what we're used to. And again, the retailers are targeted by the tobacco industry. When I go to these Board of Health hearings, the same tobacco lobbyists, they give the retailers all the same talking points. So I hear the same talking points from all these different retailers. So, I mean, they are targeted by the industry too, and kind of and they're controlled by them.
But great job, Stoughton Board of Health, for being a lead on all these policies.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? We're happy to hang and answer them, you know, for you guys. And, you know, and I want to say thank you again, particularly to Ms. Johnson and to Mary for coming out, and, you know, to Principal Miller for allowing us to be here with all of you. We want to appreciate that you guys, I have a loud voice. I want to appreciate that you guys are here. And definitely come and see our display. If you haven't seen Hidden in Plain Sight, we have it up here. We have a lot of those vaping devices in the display. If you want to see one up close, you want to touch one, you want to see other things that are ways that, sometimes adolescents conceal their drug and alcohol use, things that might be of concern to you and why you want to approach your teenager, please come and talk to us. And otherwise, be safe tonight, be careful, the roads are a little slippery, and have a great evening. Thank you for coming out.